Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to this conversation on the 3.5 gigahertz spectrum in the US, or CBRS. And this is part of a report by Sensafili in collaboration with RCR Wireless News. And today I'm talking to Derek Peterson, who is the CTO of Boingo Wireless, and also is an adjunct professor at the Colorado Technical University, and is the CTO group chair at the WBA, where he is working on how the 3.5 works in wireless networks. So, Derek, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Excellent. So first of all, I would like to give us a little bit of a preview of what is that you're doing at Boingo Wireless. Many of us associate Boingo for the Wi-Fi access. That's your public image. But I understand there is more than that. Maybe you can give us an introduction as to what you do.
Yes. So Boingo has been, of course, as you know, doing Wi-Fi since 2001. And it was about 2007 when Boingo Wireless ended up starting to deploy networks on our own. And when we started deploying those networks, it was both Wi-Fi and cellular networks. Our model is to get the wireless rights inside indoor venues, large indoor venues, and then be able to deploy networks for those venues. And so we've been deploying both cellular, mostly DAS, and now small cell networks, as well as Wi-Fi networks since 2007. It was about 2011, 2012 when we started seeking to deploy even more cellular networks. So we started answering and going after RFPs for just cellular in certain locations. And so now we've got a very strong cellular as well as Wi-Fi deployment and venues that we control and support for the venues with both cellular and Wi-Fi.
So in this case, you'd be a neutral host in the public venues, right?
Exactly. That's one of the reasons why we do so well in this now in this day and age, is that the venues are looking for a neutral host network provider who can come in and put in the right network to be able to service everybody that comes into the network, not just a single carrier or not just a single technology or device. So they want to be able to service, all the IoT devices, all of the cellular devices on the different carrier spectrum bands, as well as, the Wi-Fi devices that an individual might bring into the venue. And so we end up supporting those wireless networks for all those different types of devices and segments of the market.
So in this case, you need to have a relationship with the venue owners, obviously, to allow you to go into the venues, and also with the operators that allow you to use their spectrum, correct?
That is correct. So it's definitely a relationship in the neutral sense that you can think of. So we're both neutral on the venue side, trying to help them solve their needs, as well as very neutral with the carriers, trying to help them solve their needs. So if you go to our NOC or our Service Operations Center, you'll see every type of equipment being deployed and being managed and being monitored by our Boingo team. And we've done a really good job of being able to create automation and controls around that so that we can deploy any type of network, any type of technology, and manage and monitor and design for those. And so it's really helped us get ready for this next evolution of these new technologies that are taking advantage of all of the different technology that we've come to this point and being able to deploy it. So things like CBRS that we're going to talk about later.
Absolutely. So let's get to talk about CBRS, because that's a very interesting experiment in a way. Well, it's commercial, but it's going to be an experiment for the rest of the world in a way. And that brings a lot of innovation, or it has the potential for a lot of innovation. So how do you see it? What role does it have for you at Boingo?
Well, when you think about it, Boingo's been doing Wi-Fi since 2001. And in 2001, Wi-Fi wasn't known as Wi-Fi. It was known as 802.11, right? It had a really techie name, nerdy name, kind of like CBRS does today. It has kind of a really nerdy name. Oh, it's, CBRS. What is that? And so I think that we've been innovative from the beginning, and we've had to be innovative. So when we were in our innovative selves, figuring out what to do with Wi-Fi and the models that work for Wi-Fi, and we do things like advertising, and we use it for IoT, and we use it for individuals wanting to connect, and we use it now for calling. for Wi-Fi calling. So all of those business models have now evolved, and Wi-Fi is now 80% of traffic if you include homes. And CBRS is, that was our first foray into unlicensed spectrum as a group and as an industry. Now what we're doing is we're doing shared spectrum. So CBRS and 3.5 or 2.3 in other countries, and some of these new shared spectrum technologies that are coming out, they're yet another innovative cycle for us to be able to take bandwidth and be able to find new ways to take advantage of neutral host bandwidth. So it fits perfectly with what we do with neutral host networks and the neutral host Wi-Fi that we've been deploying. So there is so many opportunities here for us that we're excited about. We've got venues that we've worked with traditionally to get those rights, where we've had challenges finding the right monetization or the right technical strategy to meet some of the needs of the venues. So I want to provide public safety services through an LTE network. But the only way to do that today was you had to go work with an operator to try to lease a part of their spectrum. Now with shared spectrum or unlicensed spectrum models with LTE, you don't have to go lease that spectrum to meet those business needs. So there's a lot of new venue opportunities that we can take advantage of that were kind of close to us before, where we were trying to use Wi-Fi to fill them or trying to use other things. Now we can bring both Wi-Fi, we can bring unlicensed LTE solutions, and we can bring them together in 3.5 or other spectrums to really take advantage of that technology and the use cases that have been a challenge in the past.
Yeah, and it's interesting because 3.5, it tries to combine some of the advantages of unlicensed, like Wi-Fi and licensed. So it's trying to get in the middle. But from you as a neutral host or for everybody involved, you can have different ways of sharing that spectrum in the sense that you can see the venue deploying their own network and then open it to different operators and give them access. Or each operator can come in and put their own infrastructure through a neutral host like you, or independently if they wish. So there are different ways in which the same band can be used, which is not true for licensed spectrum, where only the operator can use their spectrum and they might allow you to use it, but it's their control. Here, it could go both ways because the operators can have a license, but the venue owner can also deploy their network. How do you see that working out?
Well, I think it's going to work out hopefully for the benefit of all. I mean, the goal is to sit there and provide everybody who comes into a venue access to be able to accomplish what they need. So if I have a bunch of IoT cameras that need to get connected and I need to make sure it's done securely, I can sit there, I can have a venue deploy that network, and they now have access to be able to provide a secure camera network. You also could take parts of the spectrum and make it available for roaming. So we're looking at models like that. Today, we do the same thing with Wi-Fi. We have roaming on Wi-Fi. We use Wi-Fi for individuals. We have carriers roaming onto Wi-Fi. We use it for IoT. Those same models now can be applied to LTE as well. So I can have a roaming relationship. So we stand up the 3.5 in this case in the venue. We take a couple of the channels, we make them available for private and public safety networks for the venue. You take some of it, you make it available for roamers who want to come into the venue, whichever carrier wants to do additional carrier aggregation with their existing bands, perhaps, and also with the 3.5, as well as you can use it for IoT-based solutions inside the venue. So a lot of opportunity, a lot of use cases, and it just gives us a lot more power to be able to fulfill the needs of the venue as well as all the people who want to get connected.
Yeah, and there is clearly an advantage because as a neutral host, you can provide both the venue, the services they need, and the operators, what they're trying to do in terms of monetization. But in general, that seems to shift to the venue owner. Well, the venue owners have more of an opportunity to have their own services, to have a little bit more of control, but at the same time, that might also push them towards funding the infrastructure more than they did in the past. Do you think that they're going to take more of an active role in funding the infrastructure itself?
We're seeing that happening today. There's a lot of venues where it used to be in the past, you would rely on the network provider to provide all the costing and payment for a network. And venues are starting to recognize the value of having both a digital and a physical landscape mapped together by getting a solid network in place. When people go to a stadium anymore, for example, they want to get connected to share their Facebook photos, and there's Twitter, screens up, and there's all these other things happening like AR and VR inside a venue to get people to come back and fill the seats. So having a digital strategy for a venue is important. And right behind that digital strategy is the network. If you can't get connected, you don't have a digital strategy, right? So you need to have that network available to you. So they're going to want to and have to be a part of the monetization strategy or the payment strategy so that you can put in those strong networks. And they're willing to. They just want to make sure that they get something out of it. What they don't want to have happen is that what we've done in the past, which is a venue allows a carrier or a network service provider to come in, deploy a network, and then it's a black box to them. They don't have any of the information, any of the data, any of the understanding if it's working, any way to link back in to that experience for that digital and that physical landscape. So what these unlicensed opportunities like Wi-Fi and now like what we're going to do in the unlicensed LT, it gives the venue a place to be able to tie that digital and that physical landscape together, which they haven't had in the past. We've had to do things like Foursquare check-ins and put other systems in place that were, an attempt to try to have an app control that experience instead of letting that venue have support and structure that they needed to make that experience better.
Yeah, and I guess that this is something you hear both from the venues and for the operators when you talk about a neutral host model or a model that it's owned by somebody else, obviously. So the enterprise would say if there's a neutral host or an operator, they want to have visibility into the performance of the network, have some control over the services. On the other hand, the operators, if they do not own the infrastructure, they want to have transparency and see what is it they're paying for effectively.
Right.
So, and I guess you can help them with that and trying to be the middle piece that provides that information and that the level of control that both sides need.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key thing is, like you said, they both want transparency and they both want the supportive nature that we would provide so that they can both meet the needs. The operator who manages those customers and is making sure that their connected experience is worthwhile, they need to make sure that they maintain a great connected experience for that individual when he's in that venue or when he goes to the next venue or when he goes outside or his home. They want to have that umbrella of a great connected experience. And the venue has their needs where they want to make sure that they have a great experience when they come inside that venue. And there's alignment there, in the manifesto that we recently launched, the Convergence manifesto. That's exactly what we're talking about is we need to, as a group, converge those two needs from the venue side, from the operator side, from the consumer side, converge all that so that we can end up creating a better relationship between all of them, sharing the cost to create that, sharing the cost for the umbrella, as well as the indoor venue experience between the operator and the venue, which in the past, it's really just been the umbrella's responsibility, the operator's responsibility to try to provide that umbrella both in the venue and outside the venue. And that wasn't fair, or it doesn't move as quickly as it should because we don't have enough players participating in the solution.
Yeah, and I guess it's because connectivity is becoming more important and it covers more of the things we do, that it's much more, convergence is not just a technical thing for a few geeks that like to play around with their devices. It's really part of of the operations of the venues and our daily lives. So the issue is that we're going to have multiple networks. And so convergence becomes important because it's by pulling those networks together that we can get the best out of them.
That's
in
correct.
isolation, all those networks in isolations, it's still good, but not quite as good. So the ability to integrate it's crucial, and the convergence. And I've been looking recently at also edge computing and facilitating that. How do you see that has a role in that as well?
Yeah, I think edge computing is a very important part of the solution. We're big proponents of that. We've been working on our NFV strategy for about 3 years now, and we've been deploying edge computing devices in our venues for about 3 years. We're now getting to the point where I've got a good representation of that in most of our venues. And we're now able to start sitting there, putting in unique VNFs, virtual network functions, and VBFs, virtual business functions, that allow the edge to really become a solution to be able to integrate these different networks together. And so that's been something that's been near and dear for us at Boingo for years, and we're at that stage now where the industry is also moving there. And I think it's going to end up helping all of us in the long run, because you'll have that edge, as well as you'll have federation between different clouds, whether it's your private cloud or a public cloud, to be able to service all the different needs an individual might have inside of a venue. So you'll have both the umbrella again, as well as the tight local view of everything that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Now back to 3.5 in the US. How? So from an operator point of view, service provider, who do you see or do you think is going to be most interested? Is mobile operator, cable operators, others?
I think that there's an opportunity for them all to be involved, and we're taking that approach, just like we've done with Wi-Fi and trying to steer operators to take advantage of Wi-Fi more, as well as venues we're taking advantage of it. With the different services we offer there, we're planning on doing the same thing with 3.5. There's an opportunity, there's spectrum there available for roaming. There are locations that we service, like arenas, where you get 13 or 20 concerts in there at a time in a year, which it doesn't make sense to go deploy a very large DAS network, or it might not make sense to deploy a separate small cell for every carrier. So now you can deploy a single small cell in a shared spectrum like 3.5, and then you can take care of all the operators for a fourth of the cost if you had to deploy 4 different small cells for every carrier. And I think that when the carriers and the MSOs realize that they have a network available to them, and they build the technology, that converged technology, to take advantage of it, they'll be excited to do it, just like we're finally starting to see them being excited to take advantage of Wi-Fi in some of our venues.
Now, from the venue point of view, like stadiums, obviously they're going to be interested, and then the higher the density, the bigger the venue, the higher I would imagine that the interest is. But as you move to sort of lower venues, that you start having this sort of a mid-size venues which are attractive but not quite as attractive. How do you work with them, and how do you see the interest in terms of different venues specifically for 3.5?
Yeah, so that was like the example that I gave earlier about the arena. So some of these enterprises, like take a building, it won't make sense to put all the different carriers' small cells inside the venue, right? That's our approach now. Is we have DAS system, which allows us to sectorize and really go crazy and be able to create a very large system that can adjust in the amount of density that we can support. But then we can also add small cells, and we can put them out there, a little bit less of a headache, more deployment like a Wi-Fi solution. But today you have to deploy each small cell individually for a carrier. And there's reasons behind that. It's not just a spectrum issue, because we can solve, the spectrum issues if we were using licensed spectrum, where you could have a single carrier and a small cell. But it's more about the ability to have, if you needed to make a bug fix in the operating code of a node, you don't want to have to affect every carrier's network while you're trying to upgrade a single carrier who has a bug in a certain configuration that you need to resolve. But what 3.5 gives you is it gives you the same thing like Wi-Fi, where a venue can kind of control its own destiny and do the upgrade and provide that solution for the carrier, just like what we're doing with Wi-Fi. So the venues start shrinking in size, and you're starting to be able to meet their needs without the exorbitant costs of 4 different deployments. You can do a single deployment for all 4 carriers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that would also allow you to serve relatively smaller venues, because the cost, basically the cost goes down. You just have a small cell, basically.
Right. A single cell instead of 4, right?
Yeah, exactly. That helps the business case a lot.
Yes.
Now, what about private networks in 3.5? Because you can also deploy in some environments, a venue can deploy just a private network. Do you see much interest for that?
I do. There's a lot of public safety things that you can take advantage of with a private network. In addition to that, when you think about an office building or the enterprise segment, today, a lot of companies deploy PBX systems, so they have to go put in these, big PBX systems now, and then typically, when they deploy that PBX system, they have to run cables all throughout their offices, and then so they can hook up phones to this PBX system. Well, now you have an option where you can deploy a wireless system inside your office building so that you can end up providing connectivity for everybody to be able to make phone calls. So there's a great opportunity there for enterprises. There's the beautiful thing about this is just like Wi-Fi, where you had a lot of use cases just come out of the woods since 2001. There's been so many use cases using it to unlock doors, using it for all these different IoT things. Now you can do the same thing with LTE. So you're going to have a lot of innovation cycles, I think, happening inside LTE, just like we had in Wi-Fi in the last, 15 years or 16 years. They're going to have that same innovation happening with these unique deployments that are going to serve a lot of venue needs and a lot of individual needs that different companies might have for having wireless connectivity. I mean, the IoT solutions, are also going to be huge. Putting cameras up, putting up other monitoring your electricity flows, and all those kind of things are also going to be available.
Yeah, and I think that once you have the network there, it's sort of like, as I said, with Wi-Fi, you put the network just for basic connectivity, and then you can do all sorts of other things. You can use the doorbell, so things like that you would now put a network for it. But since you have the network, it's the incremental cost of adding services. It's very low, and that drives a lot of new use cases. Yeah. Now, in terms of the timeline, because here with the 3.5, one of the issues that we had at the very beginning with Wi-Fi too is the devices. So from a network point of view, you say, okay, I install the network, but if the devices are not there, what good does it do to you? So in terms of timeline, what should we expect, and what do you expect with Boingo?
So I expect that the network devices are coming out. I've seen, I was at Mobile World Congress, as I know several people were a couple weeks ago. There were a lot of OEMs providing the network equipment. So the small cells and or DAS systems that are going to support 3.5, for example. So there are definitely connectivity, or the network connectivity systems that are coming out, and I think they're going to be available. And in fact, I plan on doing some trials here fairly soon. Hopefully over the summer, we'll get several of them done. But in addition to that, we always go back, and the biggest question I always hear is, when are the handsets going to support 3.5, right? When are the mobile phones going to support 3.5? And I think it's going to be next year. We'll start seeing it. Just my personal opinion. We know that Qualcomm's doing some of the chips. Intel's got the chips inside the phones. We know that some of the different manufacturers of the phones are starting to switch over to Intel, and I won't say who, but we know that that's happening. So that's going to end up giving us the ability to have 3.5 of those devices. But I think more important than the mobile phone is all the IoT devices, right? There is an opportunity for these cameras today, and there's a lot of IoT devices today that are being used. You know, at an airport, for example, there are aircraft that pull into the gate, and then they're leasing LTE to be able to download all of the data from before the plane, the operational data of the plane, before the plane takes off. Now you have an opportunity where you could start putting in a dongle, 3.5 dongle or something inside that plane, and all of a sudden you don't have to lease that spectrum to be able to do those things. So there's a lot of use cases, I think, and those chipsets, I think, are even going to be faster to deploy than trying to deal with a phone where I've got already a 5 gigahertz chip in it. I got a 2.4 megahertz chip. I've got, you know, all these different bands already in the phone. And how am I dealing with the filtering of all of these antennas sitting in the phone? Well, there's some of these devices, these IoT devices, where a 3.5 chip is all they need and they're ready to go. And I think you're going to see manufacturers coming out with solutions that take advantage, just like we saw Zigbee and Z-Wave and some of those technologies come out really faster using those bands.
Yeah, and I guess it's also much more controllable because it's not mobility in the sense of a user showing up everywhere within the country. So, you know, the airport would control the devices within that deployment. So it's much easier from a deployment point of view once the device is there to have it there. Right. Well, Derek, was great talking to you as usual. It's always a pleasure, and I'm sure our listeners appreciate it too. So, Derek, thanks a lot. This was a conversation for a report on 3.5 and CBRS in the US, and we talked to Derek Peterson at Boingo Wireless. Derek, thanks again.
Thank you, Monica.